All right, everyone. Welcome to the 26th episode of Real Hawk Talk. It's crazy we're at that number. We got a lot of Seahawks stuff to talk about. Before we did our last show, we were debating if they were going to make any coaching changes. The Seahawks seemed to be getting late into the process, and we were worrying like crazy last week. And this week, since our last show, it's been a crazy week of Seahawks news. They've made a ton of big moves on the staff. They made a ton of big hirings, and we got the whole crew tonight to break it down. We got Jeff Simmons, me, Brian Nemhauser, Evan Hill, Nathan Ernst. We're all here tonight. We're going to go over everything that's happened over the last week. We're going to go through all our opinions, our takes. But before we get into the Seahawks stuff, we just want to do a quick moment of silence, unfortunately. There's some terrible news that came out last night. One of the Washington State players, unfortunately, had committed suicide. I think it was, how do you pronounce his name? Do you guys know?
Tyler Helinski, I believe.
Tyler Helinski, yeah. It's just devastating news. Everyone who saw that, imagine it was just a terrible feeling in their stomach. And it was hard stuff to read for such a young kid. And so we just want to take a moment and pay respects to him and his family, anyone who's listening who knew him. Yeah, it's terrible to read anything like that. And before we get into our football stuff, anyone who knew him or anyone who had a relationship with a guy like that, it's hard stuff to read, and especially such a young guy. But it's hard to shift the conversation over right now, but I guess we're going to have to start our show. So, yeah, we had our show last week. I don't know if any of us thought that Cable, Bevel, Chris Richard, all of them are going to go out in 1 week, a day after our show. So I don't know where you guys were. I'll start this. When Bevel got fired, it was the first thing I saw in the morning. I was pretty jacked up. I hate to say that over someone's job, but just based on how the season went and our relationship with the offensive coordinator, I was pretty pumped. And I was at Costco a day later in that day. I was just doing some errands, and a alert pops up on my phone that Tom Cable got fired. I don't think I've ever fist pumped in the middle of Costco before. And I was like Evan during one of our shows. I was jacked up. And now all the news comes out. With the Seahawks blew up their staff, and yesterday it became official where they really finalized three of the most important roles on the staff. For you, I assume most of our listeners have seen this, but Brian Schottenheimer is the new offensive coordinator, replacing Darrell Bevel. Tom Cable's job, there's no real assistant head coach anymore. It's just a pure offensive line coach, Mike Solari, who used to be with Seattle on Mike Holmgren and I believe Jim Morris' staff. And yesterday it came out that Chris Richard and Michael Barrow, the last year's linebacker coach and assistant head coach, were both not. They're not coming back next year. And the new defensive coordinator is a name we're very familiar with, Ken Norton Jr. Guy used to be with Pete Carroll in Seattle and USC. I don't know if anyone saw this coming. So there's a million areas we can start. But why don't we start with the offensive coordinator? We've all talked about Darrell Bevel so many times throughout the last few years. We talked about him probably every week at our show. So I don't think any of us were too surprised that the team decided to move on. But Brian Schottenheimer, I don't think that's a name that any of us foresaw. I was telling this to Evan before our show. If I had to make a list, if I had to sit here and make a list of like 35 to 50 names for offensive coordinators that I would have been targeting for Seattle or I would have expected, I don't think he would have made the list. That doesn't mean it's a bad pick per se. I just didn't see him as a guy on my radar. I thought we had so many other names that we'd mentioned or we had thought about. I didn't see him coming. I know him and John Schneider had a relationship. So we'll start with you, Nathan. What were your thoughts when you saw the Schottenheimer news? How do you feel now, and how do you compare him to maybe what they lost in Darrell Bevel?
Yeah, I mean, with Bevel going, that wasn't the move that I necessarily wanted to see. I would have been happy if they had let Cable go and then just kind of let Bevel run the show. But obviously that Bevel news came first. And then, the Schottenheimer, there were the reports of him getting, interviewed and all that. And it seemed like whatever, the interesting guys are in the playoffs and stuff. But then they moved on and they, reportedly, and now it's official, offered him that job before, as far as we know, before they've interviewed anybody else. And so, I think his resume has been well talked about at this point. It's not good. And there's a lot of, kind of caveats and excuses to that. But For a guy that isn't, that I didn't hear talked about until he came up, he was linked to Seattle. It wasn't like it didn't seem like he was a hot candidate. And for a guy that doesn't have a particularly sterling track record, it was weird that they just, rushed out and hire him really fast. So that was the most disappointing thing to me. I mean, we see lots of guys that fail and then come back and then they do better. It's concerning that Schottenheimer's never moved up above offensive coordinator. It's one thing to hire a failed head coach. That used to be a coordinator. Those guys were usually good coordinators and they get promoted up and then they get fired and they can still come back and be a good offensive coordinator. But Schottenheimer has failed the two times he's gotten this shot. And so it's frustrating that they didn't seem to cast a wider net and look at more options. It seems like they just went with the first guy who told them they were going to run 40 times or whatever.
And Brian, you and Nathan always butt heads, so maybe this is a good time for you to jump in.
No, Nathan and I are. I mean, as per usual. In fact, Nathan is growing hair on his face now, and I'm growing it on my head. So we're like different ways. Look, I'm enthusiastic about the Brian Schottenheimer news when it started to leak out. I basically associate with innovation or forward thinking in terms of how the offense could grow and maybe evolve to match to some of Russell's strengths and things of that nature. And it was kind of a backup. It was like a safety school, right? Like everyone's got to have a safety school. That was if other things didn't work out, and that may have been exactly what happened. News has come out that what I had gotten information was leading the quarterback coach in Philadelphia, John DeFilippo. He may have indicated he's not planning to come to Seattle for the head coaching position in Arizona. He may have better options, and if he was not going to be there, have a much narrower list of possibilities. Because article earlier this week, it's not just about hiring the OC. They're giving the OC the opportunity to bring in the offensive line coach and set some of the other coaching positions, and those guys start getting snagged. We'll talk about a little later, and Nathan wrote a great article today about him. There were absolute rumors of Solari signing elsewhere, whether it was the Cowboys were interested in him. There's a couple of other teams that were interested in bringing him aboard. Population, and this is our things are just going to get worse from here. We're not going to get a better solution, and so I'm starting with, and I've got a few other thoughts, but we have plenty of time to talk about them, so we'll come back to me later.
All right, Evan, you've been very vocal on Twitter about Schottenheimer, so I'd like to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah. So I've had kind of a typical of my Seahawks reactions. I have a wide range of and progressive range of takes on Shotty. I don't like his full name, so I'm just going to call him Shotty. Obviously, I think I was pretty firm on the fact that Cable needs to go. He's our number one issue with the offense. If you bring Bevel with him, I'm okay with it. But if you only fire Bevel and you stick with Cable, then I was going to have a huge problem with that. But obviously, when the news broke, I was pretty upset just because he didn't seem like the type of coach that signaled adaptation and innovation and new philosophies and maybe a shift in how Pete was gonna have his offense run. You really didn't get those feelings, and maybe I got too hopeful in the fact that maybe Pete Carroll would shift from his identity. But I guess I was 100% wrong. And I was thinking this season did not break Pete Carroll at all. It made him double down on his philosophies. And I think Pete's going straight after that run-heavy team. And I think that's the type of team he's going to go for in 2018. So initial reaction was kind of disappointment. I know Brian tweeted out some images that showed that maybe he didn't have the best of talent throughout all of his years as an offensive coordinator, but we're going to give him a shot. We're all going to root like hell. I'm a little concerned about it, but Pete's doubling down. It's who Pete is. So not that surprising in the end.
Wow. Those are some really super exciting takes that we all have on the new offensive coordinator. Let me try to add a little bit more to that conversation. So I will say that there was a point where I was really trying to debate whether or not the Seahawks would have been better off firing Cable and keeping Bevel and consolidating everything with him, or bringing in Schottenheimer. And here's a couple reasons why I think they're better off with the path that they've taken. So one, Bevel's actually had definitely a more successful track record and has a stronger resume as an offensive coordinator than Schottenheimer. I don't think anybody could argue that. And if they could, I'd love to hear it. Bevel also, that image I shared out, Evan, it wasn't just about what act. Bevel has had the guy went from Adrian Peterson to Marshawn Lynch, and had Percy Harvin and Sidney Rice to Doug Baldwin, Golden Tate, and Sidney Rice. He's had, he had Brett Favre, at a peak point. He
did have Brett
Russell
Favre
Wilson.
the year after Shoddy had him, though. I mean,
he did. But Nathan, I think we can all acknowledge that absolutely likely had something to do with the offensive coordinator, but it probably had, I would say, way more to do with going from what was it? Not Thomas Jones. Who was his running back?
No, yeah, Thomas Jones.
I think it was Thomas Jones.
Thomas Jones was good.
Thomas Jones.
Crap on Thomas Jones too much. He was
not. Thomas Jones to Adrian Peterson. Come on, dude. That is not a comparison.
That's fine. But all I'm saying is Seahawks fans would go nuts if they signed 29, 28-year-old Thomas Jones. Or I mean, maybe not that old, but you know what I mean. Thomas Jones was a solid running back.
He was all right. He was a Pro Bowler with Schottenheimer, but Jericho Cotchery and they didn't even have Braylon Edwards that year. They had someone else. Going from that to Percy Harvin and Sidney Rice and Bernard Berrien and Adrian Peterson, that also had a lot to do with Brett Favre playing better there. So long story short, I think that Bevel looks a little bit better because of the talent that he's had to work with. And, I think this is a guy that we could be getting at a low point. I absolutely believe that perception around the league follows you pretty quickly. You get a reputation, you don't get another chance. To me, this is a one-year thing. If Schottenheimer can't show results in his first year with this additional talent, this is absolutely the most talent he's had. There's zero doubt, even if they make no changes on offense than Schottenheimer's ever had for any of his teams. And so I'm interested to see what a guy like that does, especially given, a lot of pretty strong praise from the quarterbacks that have worked with him over the years. So we'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic, even though I started off pretty pessimistic.
All right, I'm not going to let this Thomas Jones slander stand. 1,300 yards, 1,200 yards, 1,100 yards, 1,300 yards, 1,400 yards. That's a pretty good
yards per carry?
4.3, 4.1, 3.6. That was 1,100 yard. And then 4.5 and 4.2. He had 13 touchdowns and 14 touchdowns in 2008 and 2009. Thomas Jones was a good running back, or at least in a good system. I mean, let's not crap on Thomas Jones. Yeah,
Favre was hurt in 2008. I don't know with the Jets. I don't know if you guys remember that.
He was healthy for 10 weeks, and he
was playing through a rotator cuff, I think.
Yeah, and then he got hurt. Yeah.
Yeah,
I still agree with Nathan's overall point there. There was a pretty drastic comparison, but I've been trying to talk myself into the Schottenheimer thing because at first when I saw it, I absolutely hated it. And like Brian, I'd heard the DiFilippo thing from people I talked to and some of the sources, and I don't know what changed. So even the morning they hired Schottenheimer, Ian Rappaport came out and said that DiPilippo was a guy the Seahawks were targeting. I don't know if you guys remember that. So to go from him, who was a guy I've been hearing great things about and was pretty excited about, to hear Schottenheimer was kind of a very underwhelming in his stops before. That took me a while to get over, probably a week. If I had to talk myself into it, which I've been trying to have, I guess the idea is he's never really had a great quarterback since he's been an offensive coordinator. If you look at who he's had, it's been Mark Sanchez and some of those guys with the Rams, Sam Bradford. Maybe with Russell Wilson, things will get better. That's might be the most optimistic view, or maybe the talent around him, he'll be better. I know he was good with Drew Brees when he was the quarterback coach in San Diego. Philip Rivers likes him a lot. He was with Andrew Luck last year. He had a decent year before his shoulder, whatever happened with his shoulder. I guess that's the best way I can talk myself into it.
So is he a dual role? Because we haven't hired a quarterbacks coach, right? We haven't hired one yet. So is he playing OC, and is he going to be Russell's guy? Has anybody thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen anything, but I bet they're going to hire basically an assistant QB coach. I think Schottenheimer is being brought in to coach Russell. I mean, I think I don't know if this has been talked about by the team or not, but Schottenheimer is supposed to be this high energy guy, like, and I think it was Austin Davis was saying that he, when they were together in LA, that Schottenheimer really challenged him and worked him hard and all that. So I think Schottenheimer is being come in, and the stuff about accountability, is that just rumors, or that they want someone to hold Russ? I don't know if that's actually been reported, but all that stuff. Schottenheimer is being brought in to fix Russ or take Russ to the next level, I think.
Yeah, there's definitely been public reports of that, and I've heard a lot of validation of that in general. Fans might not like that concept or think it's crazy that why they talk about Russell Wilson, the offensive line's what needs to be fixed, and other things of that nature, and I think that's fine, but the people that are in that building that are creating schemes and game plans and then executed are coming to that conclusion for some reason. I've heard the term accountable a number of times. That's the exact word that's shown up, in radio interviews with some of the, national reporters that have sources inside there. And honestly, I think everyone should celebrate that. I think Russell should celebrate that, because Pete talked about the fact that he wants to be held accountable. He wants to be coached. And I think that's true. I think Russell does want to be the best. I think Russell wants to be the best quarterback that's ever played the game. And I don't think Carl Tater Smith is going to be the guy that gets him there. And I don't think Darrell Bevell, as much as Darrell Bevell's a nice guy, Darrell Bevell is not a ball buster. Darrell Bevell is not going to hold a super high bar and force people to meet it. He is going to kind of have a game plan. It's probably going to be a thoughtful game plan. He's going to expect his players to execute it. He's going to try again. And so I applaud a new approach there, because guys, I mean, if we have any hopes of really seeing the team really rebound and climb back up, do any of us doubt that Russell Wilson's going to have to be a major part of it, and that he's going to probably have to carry an even heavier burden than he's carried in the past? I just think that's a foregone conclusion. So I think that makes sense to me.
Russ seems like the kind of guy. Yeah, Russ seems like the kind of guy that would really respond to that too. I don't know if it's just because we see him get down in games and then he goes, just ballistic. But I feel like Russ will respond well to somebody challenging him, and respond well to somebody trying to. I mean, I don't know anything about locker room dynamics or anything like that, but if Schottenheimer's trying to be, the alpha dog, Russ isn't going to like that, right? Russ, there's a king in every crowd, and Russ thinks it's him. And if somebody else is in there trying to do it, I think that's just going to push Russ to bigger and better things. So, everything I've heard about Schottenheimer, I'd be ecstatic if he was being brought in as a quarterback coach. But he's not. He's going to be an offensive coordinator. So, he's got to call plays. He's got to put a playbook together. He's got to, do all this stuff. And I think it remains to be seen whether he can really do that well.
Nathan, you dug into some film the other day on the Jets, right?
Yeah, a little.
What'd you see there?
Different, I mean, nothing crazy or interesting or oh, look at this super cool thing they're doing. It was pretty straightforward stuff. To be honest, it was plays I recognized from Madden, which isn't great, probably. But because I've run some of those plays in Madden, like I knew the reads and I could tell, I could understand. I understood the offense, and maybe that's just me and my familiarity with a video game. But I did not understand the Bevel offense, especially towards the end. Like I didn't know always what the plan was. Like, what are you trying to attack here? Where is the rest supposed to go? Like, what is the thought process? I mean, they did a lot of stuff where they would have zone beaters on one side and man beaters on the other side, and so they would send guys in motions and Russ would do the pre-read, and then he'd just like sit on half the field. And I think a lot of times that was because of how these plays were built. So from that perspective, I kind of liked it. That offensive line was pretty gnarly, and they beat guys up and they did some different run stuff. When we talk about Solari, it's the same thing, right? Some similar stuff, but also some different stuff. And so it was kind of refreshing. But it didn't get me especially excited either. And I watched only a little bit of his time with the Rams, and that was less good. But also that team was a disaster. So
I'm waiting for you to talk about how great Zach Stacy was.
Zach Stacy had one good year.
What happened to him?
Don't you take Zach Stacy's one good year away from him.
He's Thomas Rawls.
By the way, since
Zach Stacy had no good years, by the way. Sorry, I was wrong.
He just played well against the Seahawks. So since we're going back and looking at old timers, one of the people in the chat actually had a good point, and I went and just validated Favre through the first 10 games of that 2008 season. His pass rating was actually 93.
Fifth in the league.
And it was 18 TDs and 12 interceptions. So that was, I think, before he got injured. And then he ended up finishing up with like 22 touchdowns and 22 interceptions. So it probably was not as great of a disparity as we've kind of painted it between when he was with Schottenheimer and when he was with Bevel.
I mean, Favre had the best year of his career, and like Favre had a lot of good years, but Favre had the best year of his career. There was a disparity there even before Favre got hurt. But yeah, it's a little unfair to just look at those season averages and say that he had a terrible year with Shoddy. He was playing okay.
So do we think he's an upgrade on Bevel, or are you not sold? Evan? You look like you have some thoughts.
TBD. It's yet to, we don't know yet. We got to give him a shot. Like we've been talking about, this is the most talent he's ever had, I think, in an offense. So we got to see what he can do. We got to see what he can do. I think this is the best quarterback he's ever had, best players, the most talent. Let's give him a shot. Let's see what happens.
What are we hoping to see from him? Is it more like a return to the run? Is it more just utilizing personnel better? Or is it getting Russell going? What's the number one thing, Brian, that you would like to see from his new coach?
I'd like to see more variation of approach. Are you guys able to hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes. I thought you were going to say run the ball more, so I was just shaking my head in anticipation.
I see. I think talk about how Schottenheimer utilized the screen more in St. Louis and felt like that was something that was missing in Seattle as a change-up to parading, especially when they started scuffling. I think that was a really astute point. Like, I think we've talked about that a little bit, but like Bevel's offenses seem to just be like banging their heads against the wall a lot of times. Like, we're going to keep trying this and eventually it's going to work. And what I've seen since, the 80s is when an offense is struggling, there's a drop play here, there's a screen play there. There's some different tactics you can use to try to get an offense unstuck on first down. And it seems like when Russell gets that first down in a drive, everything starts to open up. And so, I've read a bunch about Schottenheimer, and I've seen a lot about quick game. I've seen a lot about understanding tendencies of the defense and putting teams in high percentage chances to, I would love to see some of those elements just added to what Russell already does well. And yes, I think having one person to incorporate the run and mix that with the pass is absolutely a good thing. And I think that a team that is completely ineffectual in the run game and inefficient in the run game is going to have trouble being effective and efficient in the pass game, unless you have someone like Tom Brady. I just think that there's very few quarterbacks that are capable of overcoming inefficiencies in the run game.
All right, let's change it up a little bit. Obviously, the biggest move of the week was the removal of Tom Cable. That's a move a lot of people have been clamoring for a long time. He was pretty much the number 2 in command in the organization from a coaching perspective, and it just seemed like Cable was always going to stick around. And I don't know about you guys, I always had this fear that when Pete left, Cable was just going to be the guy to get promoted in-house. It seemed like this organization loved him. I had a long fear about that, especially when that Jake Glazer story came out that Pete was considering retiring. That's not happening anymore. Cable's gone from the organization. This took a lot of us by surprise. I said before, I was pretty jacked up. I hate to say that about someone losing their job, but just the job. We've been talking about this forever. There's just no way he could have kept his job based on what happened in the run game, based on the development of the O-line. So they bring in a guy a lot of us know. I don't know how well we know, Mike Solari. He used to coach on Mike Holmgren's staff. He was around for, I think, the year of Jim Mora, and he's bounced around the league for a long time. He coached in KC and those great offensive lines. At the high point, he was on Harbaugh's staff during those great years in San Francisco, and to a low point, he was the Giants' offensive line coach last year, and they might have had a worse offensive line than Seattle, and that might be a personnel issue. So I don't know if you guys saw on the website or on Twitter, but Nathan did a nice deep dive into Mike Solari today. So we'll start with him. Obviously, I know you want to touch on Tom Cable, so we got to go with your thoughts on Cable, your thoughts on Solari. There's a lot to get to here. So
yeah, I mean, I'm still kind of in shock that Cable's actually gone. But thank God. I mean, I'm not going to feel too bad about like being happy that a guy got fired because he was out of work for like 2 days. So good luck, Oakland. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, Cable. With Solari, though, I mean, Cable was such a big presence and was so involved in everything. And I don't think we should look for Solari to have that kind of presence and be involved that kind of way, right? Like you said, the assistant head coach thing is gone. Solari doesn't have that title. There was no talk about run game coordinator that I've heard or anything like that. So Solari will go back to being, or Solari will just be a position coach. Offensive line position coach, I mean, that might be the most important one. But position coaches only have so much influence. They can only do so much. And so, you go back and you look at his history, and he's been able to be a part of some really good things, but he's also had a ton of talent, both coaching and on the field when he's been part of the things. And he's been a part of some really bad teams. He's been a part of the dark years here in Seattle for this century. And, the Giants were good 2 years ago, but the offense wasn't particularly good. And obviously it all fell apart this year. So, he's not going to fix everything if it starts to go wrong. If Schottenheimer doesn't work, if they don't get the players, Solari is not going to be a miracle worker. But there's lots of evidence that he can be a part of the solution, a part of a really effective offense. He's developed some guys. He's kept guys performing at a high level that were already at that level and stuff. So I think at this point we can feel pretty good that if the Seahawks put the right players in place, Solari will put them to good use.
So there were obviously some rumors circulating on Twitter that everyone but Dwayne Brown was safe on the offensive line, and that basically this new O-line coach Solari was going to be given the option to basically, start from scratch and do whatever he wants. What's your thoughts on that, Nathan?
You mean Brown was the only safe one, right?
Correct.
Brown's the only, yeah, okay. Posick shouldn't be in any real jeopardy. I mean, if they want to challenge him or whatever, that's fine. But I don't think it makes sense to move on from Britt. I think people's opinion on Britt has swung wildly, and the truth has always been except for when he wasn't. Since he's been a center, the truth has always been somewhere in between. He was legitimately bad at the tackle and especially as a guard. But I don't think he regressed as much as people said he did this year. I don't think he was as good as people said he was, 2 years ago. But he's come in. He's been a part of some good offenses. He's played okay. I don't think that they should be necessarily looking to move on from him unless they have some big plan for the money that they're going to save there. So it's fine if they want to say everybody, Brown's the only safe one. But I'd be surprised to see them really aggressively try to move off of either Britt or Posick.
Yeah. I was playing gospel music so loud throughout my apartment when Tom Cable's fired. I don't listen to gospel music. I was dancing with my dog in the kitchen, did a little half-naked run throughout the park. Life was good. Life was good. And, when the Solari news came about, I was a little surprised because I immediately thought of Eric Flowers, the left tackle for the Giants. Mm-hmm. And, maybe that's not a direct connection that's super fair to, think of Solari with. But like you said, he's been a part of some successful regimes. He's been a part of some disappointing regimes. He seems to have kind of like an inconsistent record, but an inconsistent record is a better record than Tom Cable's. So
that's right.
I will absolutely take this potentially great mediocre offensive line coach over a completely consistently disastrous offensive line coach. So believe it or not, I'm actually most excited about the Solari hire. I really am. I think he's the one to make the biggest impact.
The Eric Flowers thing was bad, but in fairness to Solari, Flowers was drafted the year before him, was bad as a rookie, and was considered a reach at the time. So bounces out a little bit.
And I heard he actually coached him up a little bit throughout the season. I heard Giants fans got a little more happy with him throughout the season as he seemed to progress and kind of cut down on the penalties is what I heard.
Yeah, and one thing with position coaches and coordinators, a lot of times they get unfairly blamed. Like Solari, for example, I don't think the best offensive line coach in the world could have fixed that New York Giants offensive line. They have no talent. Yeah, maybe like Mike Munchak or the guy in New England or Bill Callahan. Those are some of the best guys. They could have made them a little better and more organized. And same with Schottenheimer, and some of the quarterbacks he's working with. I don't like when too much stock gets put into what their stats were, what some of their advanced metrics were. If there's no talent, I think if you put a bad coach with Tom Brady, I think he'd be pretty good too. So with Solari, I'm not going to, on both ends, I'm not going to put too much stock when he's coaching a team with absolutely no talent like he did the last couple of years or last year with the Giants. And when he was in Kansas City earlier in his career, he had 3 Hall of Famers on that offensive line. I think it's pretty easy to coach a team like that. So he's like Nathan was saying, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But yeah, it's nice to have a guy who is not going to be like Cable and be completely against veteran offensive linemen and try to mold all these young guys. And I know they haven't developed defensive linemen in a while or ignore pass protection. Mike Solari coached under Mike Holmgren for a long time, who had but maybe the best run offense in Seattle Seahawks history. Maybe not by advanced metrics, but just based on pure design, this is what you're supposed to do. Here's the timing of the players, the responsibility. This is it. There's no adjustments. That's how you run an offense. When Solari was given pro linemen, he was very good with them. I know there's a long way to go to get 5 pro linemen on this team, but yeah, I'm with you guys. I don't see a point of we were saying before, maybe only Dwayne Brown is safe. I don't see a point of that. I see the roster isn't a point right now where you can create more holes. So I don't see any idea Justin Britt getting moved or Ethan Posick. We all knew what his weakness was. It was strength. It was run blocking. That was his weakness. I don't think you can blame the guy. He showed a lot of positives as a rookie. He needs to get stronger. So I'm not ready to move on for him or anything like that. But hey, how about this? Jermaine Ifedi, the Oakland Raiders need a right tackle. That's the one hole in their offensive line. Trade him.
Ifedi's interesting. Ifedi, he is not really a zone blocking player. I mean, he does not fit that mold. And so if Solari does some different stuff, you could see Ifedi perform better. I mean, if you can get something for him, you should probably explore that at this point. But I wouldn't rule out a jump for Ifedi. And he's a guy that we've already seen some flashes from. And Solari using some, different schemes, some more man blocking stuff, you could see him, maximize Ifedi a little bit better than Cable did.
Good for you, Nathan. Way to defend the indefensible. I think Ifedi needs some people on his court, and I agree. Like I'm only half joking. So to add to what you're saying, and I think this is what you're getting at is, so zone blocking. A lot of it is around coordination and around athleticism and around
quick feet.
The line moving in unison, and then often getting to the next level in terms of agility. That like there's a lot of emphasis on that. That's why a lot of the lines you've seen back when it really came about in the Denver Broncos days with Alex Gibbs, they were not heavy, large men. They were very light, but they were very athletic, and they were very coordinated in how they attack defenses. Well, Ifedi is not that. This is not what he is. He is a large human, powerful man, and his strength is probably more in a power run offense, right? Where he's getting his hands on an individual and moving them as opposed to trying to cut block them or lines. And, you know, some evidence I have of that is when I've seen flashes from Ifedi, especially in the run game, he's pretty good at things like reach blocks and seals, getting to the outside and creating an edge for the running back. Those are all like, those are more about, physically overpower somebody as opposed to like really quick agility, types of maneuvers. So you're right. I still don't think Ifedi is necessarily ever going to, he doesn't strike me as the most consistent performer at any point in his career, but I think he definitely has more upside than most people give him credit for. The guy, I don't know if you guys read the article that got shared around that Mike Sando wrote when he was the Seahawks blog, beat reporter for the ESPN section. And he wrote about Mike Holmgren hiring Solari and how they thought it was one of the biggest hires that they've made on their coaching staff and done in Kansas City, and the types of players they developed there and how important that was, and how good of a teacher they feel like Solari was. And this was a guy that Pete Carroll wanted to keep on staff when he inherited, Jim Mora's staff, and Solari chose to take the job elsewhere. And the reason that Pete Carroll wasn't offering the offensive line coach is because he had Alex Gibbs. People forget that. Alex Gibbs is, arguably the best line coach ever, or one of the best line coaches ever. And Alex Gibbs retired before training camp ended that year. So Carroll was scrambling, right out of the gates. And if that had happened earlier, Solari might have been the offensive line coach. We might have never had Tom Cable. Real possibility. So if you want to blame somebody, blame Alex Gibbs.
Does anyone want to say their goodbye to Tom Cable on here?
Bye, Tom. See you later.
Evan, any final words? There's no celebration music going on.
Too many rude, awful, despicable, horrible, repulsive, demonic things would come out of my mouth if I were to say a proper goodbye to Tom Cable. So have fun in Oakland Raiders fans. I saw you guys trying to convince yourselves and talk yourself into the Tom Cable hire. Have fun with that. Your offensive line is going to turn to shit. Good luck.
Brian, what about you? You've been the one somewhat Cable defender.
My tune hasn't changed. I'm really appreciative of what Tom Cable brought to the Seahawks. I think of the first Super Bowl this city's ever won. And I think there's a lot of selective memories in what he did, and that's okay. I get it. I also agree that he has been a key part of what kept this team from winning more. And so absolutely wish him luck elsewhere, not here. Let's roll with the new guy and see if we, just addition by subtraction is really what we're going to get here.
Yeah, that's kind of cool that Cable's back with Marshawn Lynch, but it's kind of weird other than that. But he went back to Oakland where they fired him as head coach, and there was all this ugly stuff between him and Al Davis, the way it ended. John Gruden must have liked him a lot because that happened real fast.
Well, Cable's really respected across the league. I mean, and people can argue about why that is and whether that's deserved or not. We'll see. I will say, like, I am waiting. I'm absolutely waiting. I don't think we'll have to wait very long for the moment where Seahawks Twitter starts saying, gosh, like, look how good Darrell Bevel is, or look how good the Oakland line is playing in their run game. Why didn't we get that from Tom Cable? Like, we've seen that time and again. Like, they hated J.R. Sweezy. He's the worst lineman ever. And then all of a sudden he plays good. And, you know, I wish we still had him. Or James Carpenter's the worst offensive lineman. Oh, I wish we still had him. Like, on and on and on. And look, I think we're going to see that again, most likely. That there'll be some some group that comes up and wishes that we're back. I will be really clear right now that there is no situation where I thought it was the right decision to bring all of those guys back. This team absolutely, even if they get worse because of it, that's how clearly I think that the change needed to be made. You know, it's like having Jay Cutler as your quarterback. You are never going to win a Super Bowl with Jay Cutler as your quarterback. You might win 8 games or 9 games. That's fine. I'm not interested in that. We're not just trying to, like, kind of be good enough to get people to pay attention so we can keep selling seats. Like, I want a team that has a trajectory that plots towards the ultimate title. And there with this group, not at all. I think that there was infighting even within the coaching staff. I think that there was lack of communication and stale communication with the players. I think that you had plateaued. And in fact, you'd started diving. So one of those people that says, wow, that was a real big mistake to let those guys go. Totally the right decision, no matter what happens from here on out.
Brian, your big fear with Cable, everyone always wanting to move on, is what they wouldn't be able to find a coach that's comparable or better. Do you feel comfortable with Solari as that choice, or you still have that fear at all?
I definitely still have that fear. I think Solari is, he's not a home run. I think that they could have done a lot worse. So I'm comforted by the fact that they got someone who has a lot of history teaching offensive line and a lot of different types of schemes with different types of players. I hold Cable in higher regard than pretty much anybody in Seahawks Twitter. So that's, that's part of the calculus here. There will be some things that we may miss because of it. And the biggest thing, more than any of the coaching aspects, the thing that I'm most happy about Cable being gone is there's been a lot of clarity about the fact that he had a lot of impact on personnel decisions along that offensive line. That was always the thing that felt really true. Confirmation of that. We've heard that come out as part of this change. And look, offensive line drafts and free agency decisions are the number one reason, the absolute number one reason this team Super Bowl.
Were you all surprised that any of you guys, that no one really came out on Twitter or any of the players came out to defend Bevel at all? I saw some stuff on Cable, but I thought I might see something. But were you surprised by that at all?
Well, there was some stuff that came out right after Bevel got fired that, there were reports that the players were saying that he got scapegoated, right?
Oh, I didn't see that. What was do you guys hear that too?
Did I imagine that?
I personally did not, but maybe I missed it.
Maybe I imagined it. Yeah, Doug said his piece before Bevel got fired. But no, I don't think so. I think, I don't know. I think I know what Doug said before Bevel got fired and all. I'm saying it's not scheming and it's execution, and I think that's what you want Doug to say. But it was scheme, and I don't think. I don't know. I don't think when push comes to shove, I think everybody knew.
Yeah, it got to the point last year where they didn't really have an offense at all. And if Russell Wilson's fourth quarter heroics, and maybe it was the convoluted message or the coaching layers or just the lack of execution on the O-line and what Nathan was saying about design, they were just Russell Wilson's just making things happen. I know he was part of the early problems too, but got to the point last year where they didn't really have, and it's pretty amazing. They almost won 10 games, even 11 games with kicking mistakes based on how weird their offense was.
Well, I mean, are you guys aware of any other situation where there was split responsibility on run pass and coordination? You know, I've never heard of that before, and I've heard some whispers that didn't even receive the running plays until the players did midweek. Like, it's a weird stuff, right? Like, where just was set up in a weird way, I think, so Pete Carroll could bring Tom Cable aboard because he thought it was so important to have a guy like, and he gave him some responsibilities that I think were just awkward. And look, I am so looking forward to doesn't like overutilize wide receiver screens, you know, to Doug Baldwin, or, you know, that maybe red zone has some semblance of a plan that, you know, isn't completely brain dead. Like, let's have Warren Sharp on it next year. You know, hopefully he's like, not just wondering, like, do you guys understand what Darrell Bevell's doing in the red zone? Because I don't get it at all. Like, he's making really weird decisions. Like, to Nathan's point, some logic and flow to what they're doing. And maybe that's giving Brian Schottenheimer too much credit, but God, like, you know, watching the Seahawks and some of the weird and somewhat predictable and frustrating concepts that they just kept rolling out over and over again. So,
and, you know, yeah, like, these complaints about these coaches aren't new. Like, it was harder to make them when the team was going to Super Bowls and they were really not really good offenses. But, you know, we've heard people talk about Bevell's simple offense, and we've heard, you know, people have been complaining about the offensive line. I know that, you know, they had a top rushing attack and all that, but like, people were complaining about the offensive line even back in 2012 and 2013 and 2014. So, you know, it kind of seems like it's a recency bias with the team not being good or as good now, but it really isn't. And these problems have been there for a long time. And so it's, you know, like you're saying, Brian, like this weird split brain thing with the run game and the pass game. San Francisco doesn't have an offensive coordinator that I can tell. I was looking at their coaching staff, and from what I could tell, they didn't have an offensive coordinator. They have Kyle Shanahan and they have a run game coordinator, but I'm not sure if their website's reflecting that right. That's the only other time that I've seen anything remotely like that. And so just the whole shakeup and just doing things differently and new voices and fresh voices, and it sounds like maybe a little bit more of some assertive voices will be good to have.
Yeah,
agreed.
Speaking of Kyle Shanahan, so I want to switch this conversation a bit. And when I first saw the Ken Norton news, for those who don't know, Ken Norton, the former Seahawks linebacker coach, is the new defensive coordinator in Seattle. I think everyone pretty much was pretty caught off guard by this. He was a guy that Pete Carroll had multiple opportunities to promote and never did. Norton got an opportunity in Oakland with Jack Del Rio the last 2 years to be the defensive coordinator, and it might have been a personnel issue. It might have been they're not a good defense from a personnel perspective outside of Khalil Mack. I don't think anyone on their defense, maybe Bruce Irvin, would start in Seattle right now. But man, they were bad. They were 32nd, I believe, in DVOA. And Chris Richard, there's always mixed feelings on him. He had some great games. He had some lackadaisical game plans. He never seemed to really relish in that role, but he was a guy who's been Pete for a long time. So I didn't know at first if he'd be let go, but it seemed like. So back when I was saying with Kyle Shanahan, my first thought, once I started like kind of understanding, when I looked at these individual moves, I kind of hated them all at first. I like Solari, but my view in like, so when Kyle Shanahan's the head coach and he calls the plays, it really doesn't matter who the offense coordinator is. In fact, they don't even have one. It's the same thing with some of the other coaches. McVay, like, do we know who their offensive coordinator is? So all this crazy talk about Ken Norton Jr., if Pete Carroll is the de facto defensive coordinator, does it matter that Norton's the defensive coordinator on paper? Or am I off base?
Oh, man. I will tell you, when I saw the Ken Norton news came out, I had a very long expletive with a U repeated along the screen, ending with a K. Like, I think he is a really, 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 really limited defensive coordinator. And I think he's a great motivator. I think he's a great communicator. I think he's a great soldier and lieutenant for Pete Carroll. Upward mobility, to become a future coach. And I think in a situation where you've got someone like Pete Carroll, your head coach, the likely area that you're going to have a succession plan is going to be from the defensive-minded side of the field. We've seen that with Gus Bradley. We've seen that with Dan Quinn. That's where they're learning something that's kind of fundamental and maybe difference-making in how the team runs. Look, part of it's also just I've had so many conversations with fans who are like, hey, what about Ken Norton? And they were saying this like back when they initially hired Chris Richard. He's a very dynamic personality, and it's easy to kind of like, yeah, he's going to get in there and like get guys excited. But the great defensive coordinators are not just motivators. They are like amazing tacticians, and they're able to understand an offense. When you're facing Tom Brady and the multiple aspects that offense, puts in front of you, and Quinn breaking down all the possible ways to stop that. And
do you, Dan Quinn? That's where you go to stop Tom Brady.
Yeah,
it's like a 20-some point lead. That's what you want as Dan Quinn? Are you? I'm just saying.
Happened twice.
I mean,
fourth quarter. Fourth quarter.
But Brian, based on what you're saying,
who was coordinator when Seahawks gave up 10 points to the Patriots in the first quarter, lost Super Bowl? Who was that?
Yep. And who was the coordinator that held the Patriots to 3 points and had a 28-3 lead before the offense started screwing things up for
Should
Atlanta?
we pat him on the back? Do you think that makes Dan Quinn feel good?
He's one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL, and I don't think that's even a question.
Brian, but what you were saying before, that's kind of where I'm wondering: is Pete going to be the defensive coordinator?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's where we end up, and I think that's there are worse places that you end up, but it feels like a missed opportunity, like to not bring someone in that's really truly value add and can grow. I just don't see much of a ceiling. I say a pretty low ceiling for Ken Norton. So here, Bradley as a name, that was a pretty big in terms of potential value adding to the team.
Evan, what do you think of the Norton hire?
Yeah, he just seems like a cheerleader. I kind of like a glorified cheerleader. Obviously, he's a great motivator, and he's hyper, and he gets people excited and all that stuff. But I had the same thoughts as you, Jeff. This is Pete Carroll's defense. Ken Norton, I do not think is going to play a strong directional role. I think he's going to be there to get guys excited. To be frank, I know our defense had issues in 2017, but I would have been okay if they had kept Chris Richard and, in light of this Ken Norton hiring. I know Chris Richard has his big thing was like, oh, he'll blitz more, and, he's had issues with that and that type of stuff. But they had a lot of injuries on defense this past year, and I know they're getting older. I almost wish they had kept Chris Richard. I really do. His time was so. I know he didn't have much talent in Oakland, but he was so bad in Oakland, so bad. It was. You have to consider that. So I think I would have preferred to keep Chris Richard, but we'll see how it shakes out, and we'll see who the true leader of this defense is. Hunches.
Evan, how would you feel differently if you knew that there were actually issues and philosophical issues that were cropping up between Richard and Pete Carroll?
Oh, I'd feel completely differently. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that'd be huge.
I think that's part of what's been going on, reading between the lines, from what I know. I mean,
yeah, that's interesting. Then there needs to be obviously a consistent messaging and philosophy between those two positions. So if reading between the lines on that makes sense, then I think the move makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, if Norton's going to be asked to do what Dan Quinn did or do what Gus Bradley or Chris Richard did, we're in trouble, because I don't think he's suited for that role. I don't think that's his skill set. I think that was obvious in Oakland. I think it's obvious that Pete's passed on him a bunch of times. If Pete is in that Kyle Shanahan role, I'm okay with that. I can sign off on that, because when Kyle Shanahan's calling the game, no one's worrying about who their offensive coordinator is, or when Andy Reid does it, or someone that Sean McVay did. I don't know if we can name their offensive coordinator. And Mike Shanahan, same kind of thing. Gary Kubiak, that's how they ran their system. When with Gary Kubiak, when he got fired after 1 year. Norton's going to be asked to do that. This is a bad hire if that's the case. If he's just a communication down to Pete, I can live with that. It's the only way this makes sense. And Nathan, what do you see with this hire?
Yeah, I mean, all jokes aside, like if you gave me the choice between Dan Quinn and Ken Norton, I'm taking Dan Quinn. But that wasn't the choice, right? I mean, Dan Quinn's not available, I don't think. I might be. I think I'm probably the most optimistic of the bunch. I don't know why, but the Norton hire made all of this kind of click into place for me. I think a lot of people kind of clicked into place, and there was a lot of talk about it on Twitter that this was really Pete just like, forget doubling down, like he's quadrupling down. He fired both coordinators, both assistant head coaches, and brought in guys that are intense, are motivators, are probably more suited to position coaching. And are probably kind of yes men, right? And so and guys that he's comfortable with. And so this is all about Pete making sure that Pete gets what Pete wants. And I'm concerned about that on the offensive side of the ball, because there's no Pete there. I mean, but on the defensive side of the ball, if Norton's going to come in and he's going to fire these guys up, and I think that we're probably being a little unfair just talking about, his energy and stuff. I think that you can see a breakdown in fundamentals when Norton and Quinn left. Those fourth quarter collapses at the start of 2015 after those guys left. I think you've seen not a lot, and their run defense was good last year. But I think that you've seen more assignment gaffes and mistakes, especially this year. You also saw slow starts and stuff creep up this year. And so if Norton's a guy that can not only come in and get these guys fired up and get their attention, and I think that you've seen the players kind of fight a little bit more, be a little bit more vocal, right? You've seen them battle with coaches. If Norton can come in and get a lot of that under control, and Pete can be the mastermind, I think that's a very workable dynamic. And it's probably not the best, right? When you talk about like objectively, like it's not Dan Quinn, it's not Wade Phillips, or whoever you think would be the best fit for this team. But I think he can fit in a role and work and help Pete get this defense the way he wants it. And I have a lot of confidence in how Pete wants to run a defense.
And I think Nathan hits on a really good point, because if you look at these two coordinator hirings individually, probably just if you take the big picture out of it, it's hard to like either move. But when you look at the big picture, it all does come together once you see who the O-line coach is, who the hirings. Yeah, I think that's Pete saying, there's 2 years left on his contract. We got 2 years to get this thing right. I want to do it my way. I'm not changing how I think. I've been successful. He sees Jacksonville beating Pittsburgh, and he sees Minnesota, who's been able to throw the ball a little better. But yeah, this is Pete going all in on Pete, not going with maybe kind of the change that maybe we thought.
Part I'm actually most optimistic about, for for all the philosophical debates we can have here, and I actually really enjoy them, despite the fact I give Nathan crap about it. Pete's got a formula that has worked through multiple generations of the NFL, and we've seen it work not that long ago here. So I'm okay with Pete like saying, I've got the formula. I believe in this. I think we've seen that work time and again. I can quibble about at the edges here. I would have really liked them. I think what makes the most sense on the defensive side is when they have someone who's a defensive line specialist as a coordinator, a secondary coach by nature, and is excellent at building secondary. And when he has a defense. That's one of the things I really thought worked well with Dan Quinn is Dan Quinn was able to identify guys like Michael Bennett, and he was part of bringing in Cliff Averill, and he was part of drafting Jay Howard. And like, there's a lot of things where there's a complementary aspect that I don't think we've seen come up in other places. So I think they've got a decent defensive line coach. If I remember right, I want to say
Clint Hurt
or
Hurt, right? Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, but you know, Norton is a linebacker coach. I don't think, you know, that's as much a key aspect of defining the defense, but he did have to understand defenses pretty well. He did have to read them. And from what I understand, one of the things that people don't know is that he wasn't really allowed to run the defense the way he wanted to in Oakland. Jack Del Rio had a very heavy hand in how that defense ran. And I think that was oil and water. I just don't think it was a good setup. Plus, I don't think they had particularly great talent. So, you know, yeah, I could talk myself into it. It's just I wish they would have gotten someone that had more upside in that position.
So now that we're going to start looking into like personnel and player moves, we know where the coaches are now. We kind of understand what they do and what they succeed. What's the one area of the team you really want to see them try and strengthen this offseason? Because there's a lot of different areas we can go here. I know some of us aren't big believers in the running game, or whether it's maybe getting better on the defensive line or getting younger. So we'll start with you, Brian. Where do you really want to see this team attack in the offseason now that we kind of know who's going to be the guys making this team?
It's tough. You know, I think I started to compile stats on overall trends for the team, and or I've been doing that since the season ended, and I was given a lot of shit by a lot of people last year when I wrote my 5-part series. I titled it "Identity Crisis." Came out after not that far after the Seth Wickersham article. A lot of people are like, this is overblown. This is like, it's not a crisis. What are you talking about? Like Pete's philosophy, and he talks, it's all about the ball. It's a turnover thing. He talks about having a balanced offense, which is it's about efficiency, both in the run and in the pass. You know, you look at a lot of these it's special teams. It's a 3-part, you know, like a holistic team. Down, and everything pretty much is still pointing down after last season. The one place where it started ticking back up, drop off in explosive pass plays, and I think I attribute a lot of that to the addition of Shaq Griffin. I think that was like, they've got a cornerstone there, like, that they can start building on, not for the whole franchise, but a thing that's right. And so, you know, for this team to be an effective, what they once were, I think that it's actually going to take something more on the defensive side. I would like to see them really find some way. I don't care if it's in the secondary or on the defensive line, kick some ass and be a cornerstone. You know, that would be, I think, the biggest addition they could make. In my mind, imagine a situation where Chris Carson comes back and is an effective running back, that Tyler Lockett has a bounce back year and they've already got Doug Baldwin, you know, that Russell Wilson keeps going, and that the offensive line gels a little bit more. So I think for me, I'd like to see the defense, you know, have more of that dominant stature that it once was. And I think defensive line is probably the best place to do it.
What about you guys? How about you, Evan?
Yeah, no, Brian and I agree on this. I think the number one area I'd like to see them really nail this offseason, and it's not the most common fan, you know, approach, but it's cornerback for me, or maybe defensive back in general. If Pete, with where we know Pete's going and the path he wants to go down, and you know, him doubling down and tripling down on his philosophies, we have to see a more competitive, hungrier, younger defense. This defense is getting older. We are at, you know, the turning of an era here. We need another cornerstone besides Shaq Griffin. We need 2 young corners. We need a shit-talking Jalen Ramsey. That's who we need. I want a competitive edge at that position again. I want somebody that will fear us, like Richard Sherman, young in his career. If you showed up against Richard Sherman, he was going to shit talk you on Twitter the rest of the day. I want that again. I want explosive tweets from a cornerback. No, but those are really fun. But I want that competitive, nasty, hungry edge from a secondary again. Obviously, I think we've got Earl Thomas staying, and he's great, and Shaq Griffin is awesome, and Justin Coleman is great, and I think he should be a long-term keeper. But maybe it's a strong safety. Maybe it's another corner. I'd love to see them nail that. I'd love to see that position group be dominant again and really be feared on game day.
A quick aside before I want to hear the other folks answer that question, but I don't know if you guys saw Cam Chancellor's. He had a bunch of tweets in response to a Q&A, and one of them was like, "If you had to play somewhere, where would you want to go?" And he's like, "I'd want to go somewhere where they haven't won a ring yet." And like the clear implication of that to me, I don't know if you guys saw that or what your interpretation was. It's like he gets it. Like the hunger hasn't been there at the same level. It's different when you haven't won it yet. And I think you're spot on, Nathan. Like having that hunger again, I think that's a big part of how you start climbing on the way back up.
How about you, Nathan? How do you feel on this?
I think the obvious one is running back, right? I mean, super important position. They should probably take one first round. You look at all the teams in the playoffs right now, Latavius Murray, first round running back. Dion Lewis, first round running back. Jay Ajayi, first round running back. But if I can't get a running back, defense is obviously, I'm not going to say to any defender, especially if they can pass rush. I definitely wouldn't say no to anyone that can come in and hit. And if they can get some of that intensity back on defense, that'd be cool. I don't think, one of the things I don't think is being talked about a lot, and is maybe really, and running back is part of this, but where they're getting a little thin is just weapons on offense. If you're looking at losing Jimmy Graham and you're looking at losing Paul Richardson, you've got Doug, and that's the only established weapon that you have on offense.
Darbo.
Yeah. Hey, and you don't know what Darbo's going to turn into. McAvoy can only go up. But no, really, so Darbo, Tanner McAvoy, Lockett,
David
Chris
Moore.
Carson, David Moore, Mike Davis, JD McKissick. If you want to get a pass catching running back, and if you want to, hedge against Carson's injury, and you want to go get a big time wide receiver, or in the draft or whatever, this team's getting light on weapons. And if you want to improve Russ, if you want to make Russ get back to 2015 and make him as good as he can be, and you want to hold him accountable, well, you got to give him places to go with the ball, and they're at danger of really having a pretty talent poor offense. So just skill possessions in general is going to need to be addressed.
Yeah, I know David.
Jeff,
hold on. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think what you've heard is that Nathan wants to bring Thomas Jones into the Seahawks. So,
well, we had brother.
Who's the running back coach?
Yeah, Julius Jones. That didn't work out so well.
They're cousins, I think. I don't think they were brothers, but
no, I thought they were related.
Yeah, I think they were cousins. I don't know. Whatever. Bring Thomas Jones back. Make Thomas Jones.
Yeah.
Great.
So build on what Nathan was saying. I don't know if you guys saw Davis Sue. He was tweeting that he's under the impression that the Seahawks are going to go heavy on wide receiver in free agency. Do you guys see that happening, or?
Oh God, help us!
That would be. I'm going to tell you right now, with absolute 100% certainty, it would be a tragic decision. A tragic decision to allocate your money towards the wide receiver position in free agency. I'll pass on all of them for the cost they'll be demanding. I don't want a single one.
Well, one thing to consider on that, though, I'm kind of with you. I don't like the idea of spending big on a wide receiver in free agency. It worked okay with Sidney Rice. He had injuries, but I do like the idea of someone growing with Russ and all that. But this is a really deep free agent class for wide receiver. Are there going to be a couple bargain basement guys? Like one guy that I've kind of liked, and he had a crappy year and all that, but like Terrell Pryor is going to be next to free, right? And is he a guy that you can look at, and can you kind of let some of these other guys go and get paid big money and then find out who's left? And there's probably going to be a couple talented guys still there. So I don't want to see them like make a big splash necessarily, but if they want to do their bargain bin shopping at wide receiver this year, I think that it's probably a good year for it.
Yeah,
That's
I know
fair.
Allen Robinson was a name was mentioned. So to get him, what do you have to pay, like $15 million a year? I
think you're hoping for an injury discount, but I don't know.
Yeah. With all the teams that have cap room, and he's probably the top guy on a lot of lists. Yeah. We'll see how good Pete is at recruiting now.
I'm gonna list some names here, just so we let's get a thumbs up, thumbs down, or at least a yay nay from you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So Terrell Pryor, we already talked about. Sammy Watkins, 24 years old. Thumbs down from Jeff.
He's a guy who needs the ball to be happy regularly. I covered him in Buffalo. He would really struggle in this offense, the way they spread the ball around. I see it being a terrible fit.
I feel like Doug Baldwin would knock heads or something.
So, yeah, I kind of liked what I saw from Watkins this year in LA. That guy was open a lot deep downfield.
Oh, he's a good player.
But I can't imagine he's going to be affordable. Years old. Thumbs down. Thumbs down. Taylor Gabriel, 26 years old. Thumbs down. Oh, thumbs up from Nathan. Say more. And I got like a. I don't know what to do with that from Emmett.
I don't know why I think this, but Taylor Gabriel is fairly athletic, right? Can you do some stuff with him?
He's
very fast. He's probably going to be cheap. I can see him working in this offense. I mean, talking bargain bid and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm with you, Nathan. I think that's a guy that if you can get him at mid or low level, I would be interested. Yeah, the guys that really scare me when we're talking about like 12 or 14, 10 million, let's not do another Sidney Royce signing. So Kamar Aiken is actually a guy that I know that they've liked in the past. He's 28 years old. Thumbs up from Nathan.
This is what I'm about. Go get these professional receivers who are going to cost you just a couple $1 million, but that know where to be and know how to catch a ball and all that stuff.
You know what Kamar Aiken is, though? He's middle tier money. Well,
don't pay him middle tier money.
I think
you got to get these guys cheap.
He had a bad year too. You can probably get him for nothing.
Really? I feel like
I'd rather play David Moore in that role. And
I just would rather on young Ross. I'd rather bet on young guys. I feel like the talent gap might not be that significant.
I want David Moore on the roster. I want Amara Darboh on the roster. I don't want to depend on Amara Darboh. I don't want to depend on David Moore. So, if we were talking about bringing in a Taylor Gabriel or a Kamar Aiken, or, if Marquise Lee is the one that loses the money lottery this year and you bring in him, or Brian's got a whole list, bring those guys in and make those young guys. I want the young guys too. I want them to draft guys, but make those guys earn it. Don't just go in and be like, okay, Amara Darboh is our third receiver now. That's a disaster.
I think that's fair. What about Jerron Brown, 28, Arizona?
Doesn't he have a sickle cell issue or something?
No, that's John Brown. This is Jerron Brown. This guy's the tall one.
Got it.
Is he tall?
Yeah, he's definitely.
Or I guess maybe that's John Brown.
Oh, he's 6'1" or something.
That's confusing in Arizona. Two J Browns.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting names on here. Jarvis Landry is one of my favorite receivers in the game. He's going to cost a ton of money. There's no way he's coming here. No. No. John Brown from Arizona actually as well is on the list. He does have some of those injury issues, but man, he's what I thought Tyler Lockett could be, but he's kind of fallen off since then. There are some pretty interesting names. I'll grant you that. What's been our history with signing wide receivers or bringing in wide receivers other than through the draft? I don't think it's been particularly very good.
Oh, I have an interesting name. I'm just looking at the free agency list. What about Dante Moncrief?
That's an interesting guy.
He played with Schottenheimer in Indy. He knows him well.
Oh, yeah?
I think
he's 24 years old.
He's a big
24 years old.
I mean, if if you're talking about signing Preach for 8 to 10 million, I mean, I don't know what Moncrief is going to get, but if Moncrief is, more on that 5 or 6 million, I mean, that might be money better spent. I mean, similar. Moncrief can't. I don't think Moncrief can catch half as well as Preach can, but if you want to pay him half as much,
you can get him for like 3 or 4. I think I'd prefer that over P. Rich on the higher end.
What do you think Marquise Lee's going to cost?
The guy drops way too many passes.
I don't like him.
Too.
I've heard him linked to Seattle a couple times. Maybe it's the USC thing. I would be terrified to pay him in cold weather.
Yeah, Allen Robinson's one thing. Like he tore his ACL, and you can come back for that. But like Sammy Watkins had just a ton of injuries in Buffalo. Lee's had a ton of injuries in Jacksonville. Don't pay those guys.
Yeah, I just in general, I'm really struggling with the idea of spending free agent dollars on wide receivers. Like, I would rather them figure out how to. I don't know. I haven't had a chance to really look at all the free agents in the different positions. It's not a strong free agent year, and wide receiver is absolutely one of the strongest free agent positions. So I get it on that front, but I just feel like we're going to regret those decisions.
I'm surprised none of you guys have said this, but to me, if there's one area I'd like to spend on, it's offensive line still.
We were saving that for you, Jeff.
Yeah, Pete's going to double back on his philosophy. You can't be this big, powerful, bully-type team with pushovers on the offensive line. The offensive line sets the tone for so much of what you do on offense. You can't just have these guys no matter how much you invest in the defense and how much you want to be this philosophical style, if you're just even when Seattle didn't have a great offensive line, at least they can physically attack you in the run game with Sweezy and with Carpenter, and even Breno. At least they had an identity and a strength, and Seattle could get a lot better at guard. Don't spend money on Luke Jokel, please.
You know who they should spend money on at left guard though? Is pray for Andrew Norwell.
Yeah, like that's a guy they threw up.
He's a free agent.
He is a free agent, and they should absolutely pursue him. I would much rather have a nice, shiny Andrew Norwell at left guard than like a Sheldon for similar pricing. Right?
That's a great question. I 100% agree. Like without hesitation, I would absolutely pay Andrew Norwell whatever Sheldon Richardson would ask for, and let Sheldon Richardson go if that was a choice I had to make.
I think they're going to get similar salaries. I really do. Like I think they'll both land in like the 12, 13, 14 kind of range, like the low teens.
There's always been a fear among the Seahawks Twitter that free agents were scared to come here because of Cable and how he asked players to play. Ooh. It's going to be interesting to see if that changes. Ooh. Because the way players would get injured in Seattle, all of a sudden they'd leave and they'd be perfectly healthy. Max Unger always made you wonder. So if Norwell is a guy that's attainable, you have Dwayne Brown at left tackle, Norwell left guard, Britt, Posick, who knows about Fetty or Fant. That's not bad.
Yeah. There, how should I say this? There's some credibility to that theory, Jeff. And I've spoken firsthand to former Seahawks offensive line players who have echoed that they are worried that Seattle under Tom Cable would ruin their careers.
Is it?
I'm not joking.
Is it their style of play?
That's so funny.
Or what is it about Cable that does that?
I'm sorry, what, Jeff?
What is it about Cable's system that people worry? Is it the style of play, or is it the amount of times they have to cut? What is it?
I don't know. I really don't. Maybe I think it's the scheme. Maybe what Cable demands of them.
But a play where like all 5 offensive linemen jump to the ground.
Nathan, I want to hear your thoughts about Sheldon versus Norwell. If that was hypothetically a decision you had to make, either or.
What I know about Andrew Norwell is he's got a sweet beard, and he looks like what I want an offensive lineman to look.
He's an all-pro.
I don't know if he looks. Is he?
Yes, all-pro this year, first team.
There aren't a lot of those most years, so that's good. Sure, yeah. Get an all-pro guard. I'm cool with that. I don't know. I mean, a lot of it depends on what Solari wants, right? If Solari comes in, he's like, Tom Cable's a joke. These guys are good players. We can work with this. I don't think you need to go sign an offensive guard necessarily, although it wouldn't be a bad idea. If Solari comes in and says, no, we have to trash everything but Dwayne Brown, maybe the same thing. Maybe you just say, well, I'm not going to dump a ton of money into a guard at that point. So I don't know. I don't feel strongly about it. I'm for getting good players though. So he seems good. That's cool.
You're such a politician.
That's my lukewarm take.
I know that Evan wants to spend whatever money we've got on Gary Gilliam because he's available.
You know what? Bring back Gary Gilliam. I'm on that train too.
Oh, God, help us, guys. No, I mean, the names that are out there on the offensive line are – no, he's not. He is not better than Affetti.
Yes, he is.
Oh, God. No, he's not.
Versus Gary Gilliam? Are you –
Oh, my God.
Ryan.
I don't know who's right there, but that's the saddest debate.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I stayed very quiet.
No, this is like Applebee's versus Daniel's broiler. No, not that significant, but come on.
No, Gary Gilliam is not Daniel's broiler.
Gary Gilliam is a below replacement level player. He will be a backup the rest of his career.
And Gary Gilliam and Jermaine Affetti's worse.
Oh gosh, I don't know, man. The only other players that are available free agency that are interesting. Like Nate Solder, is he going to be someone that are we going to really go out and spend on him? I don't think so. That's really it. I mean, it's pretty slim pickings on the. It'd be interesting to see if Solari's got any connections to the guys that are available. But at one point people were excited about him, but he's been nothing lately. One name that's kind of interesting is Patrick Omama, who is a guard in Jacksonville and actually was a big part of their run game, and he would probably be pretty affordable. But it gets pretty. Well, he's a center. Never mind. Bradley Sowell's available. I know that gets Jeff excited.
Oh God, I think he's the worst player in the league. I think it's possible.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's really thin offensive line. I mean, Xavier Suafilo from Houston is a decent guard, maybe. But I think if there's one player that they added in free agency that would get me the most excited, it would be Andrew Norwell. I would absolutely agree with that. Offensive lineman, bring him here.
So, do you guys have any final thoughts on the coaching staff?
No, I mean, I'm excited to see if they do what they do at quarterback coach, but other than that, it seems pretty set.
Yeah, the rest of the staff. Is there any other openings that are left unfilled other than quarterback coach? Seems like they're going to. Any idea if the running back coach or the wide receiver coach are those guys in play?
As far as I know, they're still on the team. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, consider that Nate Carroll is Pete's son and is a wide receivers assistant coach. Pretty well thought of. I would be surprised if they replace those guys, but not out of the question. It'd be funny if Schottenheimer comes in and fires Pete's son as his first stuff. I mean, I think hail to the new Kings, baby. I mean, we're about. We didn't talk about going to London, but I think it's apropos for the new guard, the changing the guard.
Yep.
Did you notice how Cam in that chat he had with fans mentioned that he's going to London next year?
Cam said a lot of things. Cam said a lot of stuff.
His favorite candy is apparently his wife, which is interesting.
I'm not going to sit here and make fun of Cam Chancellor. I'm terrified.
Awesome,
so I think that's it for tonight. I think we're ready to wrap up. We've hit on all the three big coaching changes. Tom Cable's gone. Still feels weird to say it. And we're going to be back throughout the offseason. It's going to get interesting now. The Senior Bowl is next week. There's going to be a lot of players that Seahawks fans should take a look at. Range season's not till March, but we're going to be digging into that in February around the combine time. And keep a hold on the podcast. We're going to keep going as Seahawks news continues to leak out. I hope there's some availability with the coaches and the new guys so we can hear some from them. And there's been a lot of great radio interviews around Seattle this week. I know there's going to be some more tomorrow. I think Kellen Clemens is supposed to talk about Brian Schonheimer. He's been around him for a long time. So keep listening. And for our podcast, we'll be back all off season. So there's so many Seahawks things to hit on, and it's going to be a fun off season. Keep subscribing to the show. It keeps getting bigger every week, and we're going to have more guests on throughout the off season and throughout the next couple episodes. So we have a lot of fun stuff planned, but I think that's it for me. I'm ready to sign off tonight. And unless you guys have anything to jump in on, that was another good show for us. So thanks everyone for listening. Yeah, everyone who's joined on the show all night. It's been very consistent. It's a great show. So that's it for tonight. Go Hawks, and see you guys next week.
Go Hawks.